I went in for my routine annual exam to my OBGYN, my gynecologist, and I got a call 6 weeks later. Blood work came back. I had hyperthyroidism. And hyperthyroidism, there's hypothyroid, which is Hashimoto's, hyperthyroid is Graves' disease. And so it turned out that I had Graves' disease, and I asked my gynecologist at the time, how much time do I have before it progresses, like to get to the specialist? So she said, you have about 6 months before I'd worry about it being, because you just never know if you're going to get in. Well, within 2 weeks, I was in with the specialist, an endocrinologist. I had Graves' disease. This physician diagnosed me as further along. It was a good thing that I followed my gut. I just didn't like the doctor. He didn't listen to me. It wasn't that he medically gaslit me, he just minimized how I was feeling.
Menopause has long been tabooed and shrouded in secrecy, leaving many ashamed and embarrassed about seeking and extending support for this sacred rite of passage. Well, the spirit and mood have changed, and we're surrendering to curiosity, knowledge, and empowerment. In this podcast, I'm sharing my own experiences and point of view, peeking into the lifestyles and rituals of people experiencing menopause, and tapping into experts for their take on the pausal phase. This is for you if you are one of the millions of people in the menopausal phase or want to support them. I'm Dixie Lincoln Nichols, health and well-being educator and founder. This is the Pause Pod.
Hey, my sweet peas. Welcome to the Pause Pod. Today, I'm sitting down with a powerhouse at the intersection of creativity, advocacy, and equity. She's a purpose-driven leader and brand innovator who's made it her mission to transform how we talk about health and whose stories get heard. As the founder of Under the Sisterhood, she's created transformative spaces for women's voices to be heard, celebrated, and elevated, especially around health across every life stage. She didn't stop there. She also founded Sisterhood, a not-for-profit that cultivates leadership and sisterhood in under-resourced communities, and Other Good, a health equity agency that champions representation for women, Asian populations, and historically excluded groups. She's a storyteller, a change maker, and a true believer in the power of community to drive impact. Let's welcome to the pod, Elizabeth Elfenbein. Elizabeth, thank you so much for being here on the Pause Pod. I've been looking forward to sitting with you, having this conversation. We've sat together on different platforms for different projects, but I get to bring you here on the Pause Pod to enlighten us about your journey and about your work. So thank you for saying yes.
Well, thank you for having me. I love the work you're doing, Dixie. I really love it. I love the fact that it's not just midlife, it's about well aging, which is so important. So thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Let's dive right into it. We'll start with your work with Under the Sisterhood, the agency, and all that encompasses Under the Sisterhood. All of it centers around empowerment and amplifying women's voices. What inspired you to create these platforms? And tell us a bit about your personal journey and how it influenced your mission.
Well, wow. I mean, this is a big question, everybody. But I will take you on a personal journey because I asked the same question. And what I would say is, it was very personal for me. I had left agency life after a 30-year career, and there was no issue in terms of being seen, being heard. I had a very, very positive career experience. Of course, moments over my life in the advertising world, it was very hard. A lot of women felt invisible, and so it took time to get that. But my last 10 years or so in the industry was fantastic. But what really lacked for me was the visibility in, I would say, my home life. And recognizing, women go through, we do so many things for our family. And on top of it, we have these big careers, we work these crazy hours, we're doing everything to keep everything going. And there lacks so much acknowledgement of the hard work and the way we give. We have have the broadest shoulders. And so, so I happened to go through a divorce in 2019, and I had, just coming out of it, have been doing a lot of thinking. I have been doing work at a startup, actually before the startup, and work around going into marginalized communities and giving voice. And I had this sort of moment where I had this, like, wait a minute, Under the Sisterhood. The name came to me in 2000, and I think the end of 2018, early 2019, and I wasn't quite ready because I was in sort of not I'm a very up person, but I wasn't in, from a creative perspective, I was coming at it from a dark place, and I wanted it to be celebratory. Like you with the well aging, it's about celebrating this phase of our life. So I actually parked the idea. I had the name. I didn't buy the URL at that time. I bought it not too late thereafter. And then I went about my life business-wise. I left from working and dealing with caregivers and the aging population and giving voice to the aging population. And in that job, because I was part of a startup and I was an executive, so I worked 20 hours a week. It gave me the opportunity to build. I woke up one morning and I'm like, I think I know what it is. I can see it. And so I literally could see the logo, the brand, and I could imagine it. And I'm like, we're going to create the safe space for women to be seen, heard, and celebrated. I've since added acknowledged or valued. Celebrated's really nice, but in my learnings of interviewing over 200 women at various life stages, everybody needs to feel acknowledged and valued. They want to feel seen, they want to feel heard, and acknowledged and valued. And I think in today's climate, even more so. So in 2022, I woke up and I'm like, I have it. And I'm like, I'm going to run to the roar and I'm going to build it now. And I started reaching out. I'm going to use the platform to give voice to women. But how do we do that? So I started with a podcast, our Under the Sisterhood Season 1 podcast. And I asked the question, what does it mean to be a woman in today's world? And I reached out to my network, and it was really important to me at the time. I didn't say we're going to be an intergenerational company, social impact company. I said we are going to be a social impact company that is for all inclusive, all ages, all backgrounds, all cultures. I wanted to make sure that everybody felt welcome to be seen and heard and to come into our events and our spaces. And so it's really interesting in that regard. And in the process, when we launched, instead of dropping one podcast and focusing on one individual on our launch date, which, by the way, was on Women's Equality Day, August 26, 2022, I dropped 12 podcasts. Now, in hindsight, it didn't give each one enough of an opportunity to shine the way, but it made a statement because of the 12 women, they were represented in 8 different countries, ages 18 to 60. So when you look at it, we really answered our mission to be all inclusive, all ages, all backgrounds. And so that was sort of how the journey began with Under the Sisterhood and continues to build. And you referenced the Otherhood Agency. And, I've always kept a side hustle, if you will, a side company to do branding work, to do social impact work. And it wasn't until recently, and I think you'll appreciate this, Dixie, I was taking a walk and I was going to be going into a meeting with a senior executive of a holding company. And I'm like, how do I want to frame my story? Like, what makes me different? I'm much more than a chief creative officer, although I love the role and I can do that role. But I have this vast experience, and I started to reflect on what the past 10 years looked like. And, I had this moment. I'm like, I've been basically giving voice to people who've been marginalized on the margin or on the fringe. And originally the name was going to be On the Margin. And, we're in a climate where I'm just like saying, I'm outing. I'm like, yeah, no, it's not okay to be doing this. Everybody isn't everybody. Everybody's individuals and their unique selves. And so I started to recall my journey. And as I said, in 2015, I created this platform called Caregivers Speak Up to give voices to the unsung heroes. I don't know, 65 million is way more than that now. Million Americans back in 2015 who were caregivers. 8 out of 10 of the caregivers are women. So I was giving voice to women as well. We had a series of documentaries that were launched in Cannes. And then when I left that organization, I went to Comcast and to their NBC Universal, to their health innovation arm. And I convinced them as well that, look, you have 130,000 employees. You are a self-insured company. You're building technology. Don't you want to know? Look at the caregivers. They have young children. They have aging parents. They have siblings who might have disabilities. So we did a day in the home of the caregiver at Comcast, which was wonderful. So I continued to give voice, by the way, running to unmet needs, not recognizing that my through line was going to be giving voice. It was looking at unmet needs. And then the group was dismantled, and we started a consumer technology company, kind of age tech, I call it, called Cherish. And their whole thing was about going into the aging population and people living with chronic conditions. But the strongest focus was on the aging population. And so how do we go into that community and start to build relationships? And so I went out and I interviewed over 50 people from around the world, ages 55 to 88. 88 is Morris, he might be 89 now, to ask them what their attitudes were about aging. And so we created this social movement called Aging with Attitude. My partner and creative partner, Sharon, came up with that. And it's just a wonderful idea. Again, giving voice to a marginalized and other community. And then after that, I had launched Under the Sisterhood, where I give voice to women of all backgrounds, so, of all cultures, all backgrounds, and all ages. And so looking at that, looking at the LGBTQ plus community and trans and people of color, and like looking across the board at women and how they show up and giving them voice to be seen, heard, and again celebrated. So the through line has been that. And so as I was thinking about it, I'm like, gee, I'm really about giving voice to others. In today's world, we're not allowed to say we're women, we're female, we're this color or that color. We're all the same. Well, we're really not. And we need to acknowledge others. And so I rebranded the company to be Otherhood Agency. And like Under the Sisterhood, we have very discrete offerings, for corporations or for companies. With Otherhood, we want to focus on three things. And so, looking at mission-driven branding, driving and creating social impact initiatives and campaigns, and then really in both cases, insight engines. So we have Under the Hood engines for Under the Sisterhood, and then the other engine for Otherhood. And that's when we can go in with companies, with brands, and really understand the communities that they're serving and create insights reports and get into what matters to them and how they sell to them. So at the end of the day, we're not all everybody. We're not all, white men or white women. We are all uniquely ourselves and have different discrete ways of doing things. And we need to see that. We need to hear that. We need to do more than acknowledge it and more than celebrate it. We need to create for that. So that was how Otherhood Agency came about.
Wow, what a story. You've been across the spectrum. I love the intergenerational aspect of it, bridging all of these different age groups together for one common cause, which is well-being, right? Which is community, right? You bring people together to form community, to support them in whatever it is that they're going through in life. And you do it so beautifully with all of the hoods that you go under, right? I like that. All of the hoods that you go under. So one of the things I have to say is that ageism, and this is something you've tackled, ageism is still pervasive, especially in media and advertising, like you mentioned. What shifts have you seen in the industry regarding how midlife and older women are represented? And where do you still think there is a need for change?
Well, this is a really interesting question. And I think a lot has happened, I would say, in the past couple of years, the past year in particular, when we think about the burgeoning menopause conversation. So I think that suddenly midlife has gotten a lot of attention, and very grateful for the different leaders who are going out there, creating the M Factor film, creating all the different things, all the leaders, and all the companies that are creating products and solutions for midlife. But I think it's been years in the making where women have needed to be seen. Again, back to the seen, heard, acknowledged, and celebrated. And I think, it's interesting. I think about Unilever and Dove's Real Beauty campaign when they went out and they shifted the mindset around how you could show up and really celebrate and love your body, and really about self-acceptance. And so I think it's been slowly like brewing in the past couple of years. Midlife has gotten a lot of attention. It's funny because it was one of the projects that I wanted to create in my last year at my previous company, was going out and creating a midlife project. And the comment was around, well, there's the AARP for that. I'm like, yeah, no, you're missing the point. And now suddenly midlife is the thing. So I think, and then you have, I think what's also, of course, all the celebrities going out, not only endorsing it, the Halle Berrys of the world, the Reese Witherspoons, giving attention to it, having it be part of their conversations, Kate Winslet, all of those. So I think as soon as celebrities go out there and start talking about aging, suddenly it becomes okay. Jamie Lee Curtis, how we're going to age well and what have you. So I think the beauty is that all of this started surfacing and bubbling up, and now it's been giving voice. And it's sort of like this taboo topic is suddenly open and unveiled and unleashed. And now women are showing up and feeling more comfortable in their skin in a lot of ways, I think. But I also think that social media, because of the nature of the faux sense of reality and the filters and stuff, the pressure on women to not age and not age gracefully. So I think that there's this contradiction. And to be honest with you, Dixie, I didn't come into this thinking about this question. I am thinking about this in this moment, and it's important to cite that. Because as I say, yes, menopause is getting all this attention, and social media is activating and igniting it and giving voice, and we have these films and all these things happening. We also have social media making women who feel less than because we live in a society where objectivism and objectification it has been something that we've grown up with. And I have to say, it's interesting, when I started to think about coming into this conversation, because I know your focus is on midlife and healthy aging or wellness and aging. I think that objectification has been at the core on a systematic level of really hurting and doing so much damage to women and girls. Girls at a very young age get a false sense of what real and good and healthy looks like. And so I think that on one hand, we've given voice, and that's the cat's out of the bag with menopause. I think that we still have this issue with, we might be talking about skinny is out and strong is in. That's great. But I still think the way people show up on social media and and what's real and what's fake, and how we are seen as women at various stages of life still continue to be an issue. And I think, I'll be honest with you, not to bring the current climate in, but I think with this administration, I think the objectification of women is actually going to go up. It's not going to come down. I think it's incumbent upon us to say it's okay to age with grace and beauty and feel good about ourselves as we age, and to give ourselves grace in that way. But I think that because now we are just going to be baby breeders and thought of as objects for male, whatever it may be. I don't know what the right way to even put this is. I think that we're going to see a downturn, if to be honest, not an upswing. So I think that this is something as women we're going to need to combat even more now and be very mindful of it. It doesn't mean we don't want to look and feel beautiful as we age, and that we want to try and reverse aging as much as possible because we want to feel good. We also have to own that this is where we are. We've had a great how many decades in this world, and this is part of the process, and it's natural. And so I think we have at least 4 years before we're going to see something different, and that's assuming that things change in 4 years, where women aren't treated as objects and are able to really love themselves for who they are.
Absolutely. I love that. I love the breadth of what you just shared. And I think it is a catch-22, isn't it? Social media, it's given us the platform to have a voice, but then it's also discouraging and can be disempowering to us. And young girls are watching that. And as older women, we get to be the example. We don't have to be. This is a choice. Being an example is a choice. And so if you choose to show younger women that, hey, this is how you age, you can age however the hell you want to. You can wear whatever color you want to. You can dye your hair whatever color. You can go gray if you want to. You can cut it off if you want to. You can go bald if you like. Our doing it is going to give them permission to do it as well. And so they can
I
celebrate themselves. Yeah.
I I love that. I'm sorry to interject. It makes me excited to hear that. And Dixie, we're both in the same
Yeah.
position. I have two daughters. I have a 32-year-old and a
Mhm.
31-year-old. And it is imperative that they understand their value as women is not tied to looking a certain way. It's
Exactly.
about showing up
Hmm.
as their authentic selves, embracing who they are, loving themselves, and being good people.
And knowing that they can change, knowing that if they don't like
Mm,
this version of themselves because it's not doing what they wanted to do deep within, that it's okay. You get to change. And that leads me to my next question, which is about reinvention. So, you've
mm.
spoken about the importance of reinvention in midlife. What advice do you have for women who feel stuck but don't know where to start their next chapter?
I think that is a great question. And, maybe I can talk a little bit about my experience. I mean, I had been at a company for 10 years and it was just time. I felt I had done all I could do and I needed something new and different. And I didn't know what it was. And I even at the end, when they were giving me the champagne toast, I said, we had a mantra on the wall, be great to do good. I said to everyone, like, you're my garden, it's this beautiful, you're whatever. I said, I'm going to go be great to do good. I kind of made a joke about it. I said, I don't know what the good is. So, my point in saying that is, you don't have to know exactly what it is. You have to give yourself, my advice would be, give yourself space. In midlife, you've probably done a lot of things to support your family. Like I worked crazy. I mean, I had a very, very wonderful career. Please don't get me wrong, but I worked so hard to help support my family, give them a good life. At this stage, and I'm using myself as an example, this next phase of your life is what lights your soul on fire? What gets you excited to wake up in the morning? By the way, I always was excited to wake up in the morning. I loved the work I did, but it was very stressful. So now you have this inflection point, you feel stuck. I'm now talking to the audience. How do you look at life? Well, first of all, you have to pause. Life in the
Life in
pause.
the pause.
Pause
The
button.
pause spot. Mhm.
You have to pause. You have to give yourself some space. For me, I started meditating. I started practicing transcendental meditation. And that slowed me down so much. I didn't have to have every answer. It's sort of, you referred to giving them permission. Now I would say giving myself permission to not have all the answers. Like I'm one who I like to have a sense of what is. Now, 7 years later, 8 years later, I'm embracing uncomfort zone and uncertainty. We live in an uncertain time. So what I would say to women is like, trust your gut. After interviewing 200 women, some of the things that came out, insights, one of the top ones is women trusting their gut and knowing they know where they need to be and what they need to be doing next. Sometimes it's about how to execute that and figuring that out. Lean into community. You talk a lot about this, Dixie, in our conversations. When you go into community, you get more ideas. You get the support you might need. It also might ignite you. It might inspire you. It might also say, hey, what if you thought of it this way or that way? I know that I'm going to share something that it's going to sound maybe a little surprising. I had a huge voice in my industry. I left the industry, leaving the industry I was in for over 30 years, people knowing me, having a voice, having a stature, leaving and going and working, I'll say, at Comcast, where 130,000 employees, suddenly I was a number who had a spot in a said thing. I was a chief creative officer in this unit. The point is that suddenly I had to reprove and all these things I had to figure out. I was no longer in ad agency world. I was in big corporate America world. Different animal. How do I show up in that space? How do I get comfortable and find my voice and what have you? And so what I did, I ended up not having a voice, not being my full authentic self to fit into something that I wasn't meant to be in. But it was an awesome learning experience. I have met some people who have stayed in my life who have been very important. But what I want to say to you about that moment is it's like knowing like when it's not the right thing and giving yourself that grace. And so I went dark and I had to find my voice again. And Under the Sisterhood gave me that opportunity to find my voice again. And so what I'm saying is, you don't know what it's going to look like. You know, midlife is your time to reevaluate. Your kids are likely grown. If you have younger kids, you might not have the same sort of luxury, but you know, you're on you have a timeline, if you will. So look at your timeline and start planting seeds, things that you're passionate about, because I think this is a phase where women should be pursuing what they're passionate about, because you know, women are such givers, so they're going to be doing things of purpose. So make them be something of purpose for you. Like, are you living your purpose now versus someone else's?
And also, are you benefiting from your purpose, right? You don't just want to do something just for everybody, but then you're not benefiting from it, right? Because that just leads you back to where you got started, which is like, what do I
I
want,
love that.
right? So it's so important. Now, you mentioned community. And I love talking about community too. We've talked about community and the benefits of community.
Mm,
You are a champion for community because you have the sisterhood, and that's all about community, a community of women worldwide. And also, I want to say that when you went to Comcast, you found yourself feeling like a number. That doesn't feel like real connected community, right? How have these connections that you formed within these tight knit communities you now have shaped your life? And what do you think the key is to fostering those deep, meaningful connections and relationships that are supportive within communities?
God, this is a beautiful
Yeah,
question and really deep.
yeah.
And I just got off a call with a woman, Meryl, from London, and we were talking about neurodivergent
Mm.
minds. And what I will tell you is that I had the most profound conversation with her. And she stated a statistic, and I might not have this perfect. She said 67% of neurodivergent minds go to social justice. And so I'm neurodivergent. I have ADHD, I have, you know, whatever I have. I have a very fruitful and wonderful life, but understanding who I am. And so when I connect and go into these communities, I connect. I don't go in, I'm not trying to amass quantity. It's about quality of relationships. When you build quality of relationships, people show up in spaces and they want to be there more and more because they feel safe. And so I think I did this just by the nature of how I am wired and built as a human. I don't think that this is something that there was an agenda. I'm going to go out and do this. It's just who I am. You know, why did I want an intergenerational company and a company that's all inclusive, all backgrounds, LGBTQ plus, and people of color and people from everywhere? Why did that matter to me? Because in my life, from the time I was a little girl, my mom, you know, her best friend was Harry, this beautiful gay artist. The people in my neighborhood, the people who defended me when I was bullied were people like, when I look at the people who touched my life over a lifetime, it's not one said group. And I honestly, I don't feel comfortable with one said group. I feel like that my life is not vanilla. It's not about, for me, it's about a tapestry. It's about a lifetime of, you know, meaning. And so I'll give you a great example. And this is another thing that shaped me. Well, going off to Pratt shaped me because I finally found that I was with a bunch of others, very unique people, a population, and people from all around the world. And all backgrounds. But my daughter, my eldest, was a professional athlete, and she traveled the world. And I got to travel a number of times with her. And one great example was I went and met her in Egypt, in Cairo. And she was there for a month training. I think she was 15 or 16. And I went over, and she was staying with a family for a couple of weeks and with a coach for a couple of weeks. The family she stayed with, they had me for dinner. And she would travel all around the world for tournaments, and I would meet people. She played a sport that was a global sport. I'd meet people from all around the world. And this particular family had me over for dinner, and the woman wearing a hijab made I don't know, 15 course, maybe more meal, all kinds of things on the table. She didn't speak an ounce of English. She worked for a week to make this beautiful meal for Olivia's mother. I went over, it was myself and my daughter in a culture where you don't show up without a husband. It was very interesting. And we couldn't communicate. The husband spoke English, the daughter spoke English, and she ended up coming to the US for college. Anyway, long story short, we're at the tournament. We have a beautiful dinner. I'm like so thankful. I'm very warm. I'm smiling. We are literally using visual cues, body language to show our love for each other. And then we're at a tournament and we're sitting and watching our daughters or whatever. I don't know if one was playing or the other. We're sitting next to each other and we're just holding each other's arms and just embracing the sisterhood. And with no ability to communicate other than that language, our body language. And that was a moment for me, another pause moment that had a profound impact on me. And so every community I went into to go watch my daughter, the people I connected with and the way I connected with them mattered to me. I have been, I went to Pratt Institute, an art school. It is a school of total others. So LGBTQ plus was wonderful. My son is gay. So learning to be in these communities wasn't about learning, I just was. So if someone has a kind heart and you can feel that they're well-intended as an empath, like I'm all in and it doesn't matter. So I just have had a strong desire to have people of all walks, of all generations in my life, because I just love the human connection. And I love the one-on-one nature, and I'm happy to connect them. When I feel the goodness, I want to spread it. I don't want to keep it to self.
Right. And so you leaned into that, right? You had community in these other spaces that you occupied as an employee, but as the person who was steering the ship, it looked very different and it felt very different because of what you injected into it, which was your own experience and how you see the world through your very unique eyes with your very unique experiences. So, yeah, that's so powerful and a great statistic to know about neurodivergency, something I'm now learning about. Let's look a bit about storytelling because I know you are a storyteller. You love stories and how stories shape people's lives. And a lot of what is happening under the sisterhood and under all of the hoods of the work that you do is storytelling, right? And you jump into stories with every explanation that you give, you connect it to something tangible, a story that happened. How do you see storytelling as playing a role in changing the perception of aging and reshaping societal narratives around midlife?
Well, I think this is a great question. And I'll tell you why. Because I think that if we step back and look at stories and the power that stories have, like to inspire action, apparently it's like when you use stories to tell a story versus like whether it's clinical or what have you, when you use stories and people are sharing their story, you have a 22 times greater chance of getting people to engage. So that's 22 times more engagement. If you look at that now specifically with the aging population and how we can use stories, I think that what I've heard, and I did these Aging with Attitude interviews from 2020 to 2022, so during the pandemic. But, as I recall, a lot of what came up was the feeling of invisibility. And so I think that if we can go out and capture stories, if I can find companies that want to go into the aging population. Oh, by the way, it's only $1 trillion economy, age tech. When you look at the aging population, the silver tsunami, by 2030, there will be more people over 65 than under 18. So when you look at that and you look at the fact that it represents $1 trillion economy, like it's like foolish for companies and brands not to jump on how can I go out and communicate, not to sell product with. How can I understand what their needs are? What products do we need to create? How do I market to this audience so they don't feel it's transactional, so they feel that we care? And so what I would say is stories, if you tell stories and you use stories authentically, because stories aren't something you craft. It's not coming up with a script like a TV spot. Even though it's telling a story, it's then manufactured. Stories are the ability to go in and organically, right in this moment, have a conversation and share something and connect dots from one thing to the next. And when we think about the aging population, if we shared more stories while people are, and you used midlife as an example, midlife is a 40 plus, but I think of, aging as 60 plus, where, ageism is such a huge topic, and, basically create visibility for them, reshape, don't erase them, don't make them invisible. Give them voice, acknowledge them, celebrate them. Look at what goes on in different cultures. It's only the Western culture that has this perception that somehow as we age, we're of less value. We have decades of lived experiences and expertise that adds tremendous value. And if you think about the silver tsunami that's happening, that we're in, if you think about that and you think about the trends, they're like one of the largest demographics in terms of purchasing power. Like, why wouldn't you serve them in a way that they need to be served? And so, like, for me, it's like nonsensical that this hasn't already happened. We did a story sharing report under the Sisterhood, the impact of story sharing, and there's so many amazing stats within that. We're going to be looking at women's health and the impact of using stories to inspire women to act. I think what you're hitting on is, we'll be doing something for otherhood as well, but as we look at aging, what are those moments? How can we use stories to engage and make this population feel that they matter? And I think that's one thing I haven't said yet, is when you get into these conversations and they're intimate and you're going deep with people, the person on the other side, there's an exchange happening, a human exchange, not a value exchange. It's not transactional. And when it means you're seeing them, and when you're seeing them, you are showing them that they matter, that they are worth your time and the conversation to dig deeper. And so I think there's profound impact on that from a company and a corporate perspective. I think that as soon as when companies start doing this, they'll see the growth in their products and their brands, exponential growth. I think we're in a time, and I've been having several conversations with different leaders in different capacities of life and at different ages. And a lot of the conversation, particularly with what's going on in the US, is we are in such a time of fear, actually. And this, Dixie, you might have had a part of this conversation. We're living in so much fear that conversations aren't being had and stories aren't being told. And so being able to be your authentic selves and have these moments of feeling seen and safe is going to be more important than ever. As it relates to corporations and brands giving voice, I think it's going to be really important. And for the companies that do that, they're going to have retention. Their retention level will be hold steady. It will be at least at this or like this. They will have less areas of attrition. They will have less need to look at, they'll have greater opportunity from a hiring practice, because people will want to be part of a company that sees their employees, that hears their employees, that celebrates them at every life stage. And then the companies, back to the aging population part, the companies that celebrate people at every stage of their career and acknowledges that regardless, they have empirical experience that will help shape the future of their organization, as well as they might be their future, their customer. Like I'll give an example, just as Comcast. Comcast has young mothers, but guess what? Comcast isn't my 75-year-old aunt, serving my 75-year-old aunt up in northern Connecticut. So my point is like you have to see everybody. You can't just see what you want to see and say that everybody is everybody. You have to acknowledge where they are. And I highly urge companies to think of stories as a means to really connect with people wherever they are at whatever point in life.
I love that. So when we talk about menopause and we talk about aging well, if we tell stories about our experiences, whatever the experiences are, be they great experiences or unpleasant experiences, like so many do with the menopausal symptoms, people want to know more. They lean in and they listen more. So basically, what I'm hearing you say here is that It's the power of storytelling that's going to move this movement forward. Because if you're noticing, like on the in the landscape, people are talking about midlife and they're talking about menopause, but they're doing it through their own experiences. And when we hear these experiences, that's when we want to know, well, we need research, or we need support, or we need doctors to be educated more, or we need community so that we can talk together and huddle and heal together, right? It all comes from telling a story. But if we're not allowed to share our stories and our experiences, then nothing gets moved forward, is what I'm hearing.
And and to build on that, I love that, Dixie. And I know that this is about menopause, this pause, this phase, and what you're doing. And what I want to say is, we look at stories not as storytelling, but as story sharing, because we're giving permission. And I think there's a slight nuance in that. But when you share stories, what we have found is that it resonates with another woman. And so, for instance, we have our Under the Hood of Women's Health platform, and from puberty to postmenopause. So just say we're looking at perimenopause, menopause, and postmenopause, and all the things that come within that. You might have fibroids, you might have endometriosis, you might have breast cancer or worried about breast health. You might want to hear from an expert or a woman going through it. It's not just sharing their lived experiences. By sharing this, we're informing, we're educating, and we're inspiring women to say, you're not alone in this, and it's okay. Go get that checkup. Here are 5 things you should know, or you might want to have that conversation with your physician. So what we have found, and I would say again, back to the comment earlier about the fact that we're in a time where menopause has been outed, so it's a big topic out there. So women are getting more comfortable in talking about it. Sexual health will be next. We know all kinds of things, period health, like each life stage. But what's interesting about the menopause is by giving women permission to tell their stories and having it not be taboo, they are saying to the next woman, they're legitimizing what the next woman's going through. And there's a lot of conversations about medical gaslighting, but I think that even in our homes, we can be gaslit. Oh, what you're feeling, you're not dying, you're whatever. It's like it is so minimized. And then what women think is that they're crazy or they're going through these different things. So by hearing another woman's story, they're actually like, wow, I've been experiencing the same thing. I didn't realize that. It wasn't until, 10 years later that I realized that phase was perimenopause or whatever. And so I think that sharing stories allows women to connect the dots in their own lives through someone else's story. And it's resonant and it inspires action. It gives them permission to say, you know what, I'm due for that checkup. Let me go and get that mammogram. Oh, I didn't go for that. Maybe I should consider HRTs. Maybe I shouldn't. Maybe there's a holistic way. But I think by hearing other stories, suddenly you're more informed and more educated. And I think one of the biggest things we know in women's health is that women aren't educated. Not only are there care deserts, women in general aren't educated, as smart as we think we are. And even, I know I was I was thinking about Dr. Shiva Gofrani. She's amazing, an OBGYN, and she was talking about, doctors are wonderful, but they go in and they focus on one key area. So you could have a physician, like my stepmother's a nephrologist, who might not know all the stuff about OBGYN, because that's not where her training lies. So I think that even physicians, you even referred to it, need to be more educated. And so I think that by doing this, by giving voice to it, by putting it out there and making it real, you can't unhear or unsee things, right?
Right. I
So,
agree.
so
Yeah, totally agree. And the thing is, I just want to add to that, women aren't educated about their health and well-being enough. Like that's it. It's like because they've not been prioritized. Their health and their well-being have not been prioritized. And so there is not enough research so that we can get to the bottom of the things that are actually happening to our bodies so that we can take the appropriate action for our bodies, right? Now that you've shared the importance of storytelling, I want you to share your story, your menopause story, if you can remember. I'm sure you can remember.
I have an interesting story, and I'm going to tell the story with Under the Sisterhood as well. I didn't know I was going through perimenopause. I had night sweats some hot flashes, but not bad. I was and have continued to be highly athletic. So I was a competitive athlete, and I think that helped. I've always lived a pretty healthy life. I don't like drink. I like eat pretty healthy. I am very, and with all the things, the self-care routines I put into my life, I think it's probably helped my menopause. But I did have something happen to me when I think I was, I don't know if it was 40, maybe I was 48 or 50. I don't recall the exact age. I think it was maybe 49. I went in for my routine annual exam to my OBGYN, my gynecologist, and I got a call 6 weeks later. Blood work came back. I had hyperthyroidism. And hyperthyroidism, there's hypothyroid, which is Hashimoto's, hyperthyroid is Graves' disease. And so it turned out that I had Graves' disease, and I asked my gynecologist at the time, how much time do I have before it progresses, like to get to the specialist? So she said, you have about 6 months before I'd worry about it being, because you just never know if you're going to get in. Well, within 2 weeks, I was in with a specialist, an endocrinologist. I had Graves' disease. This physician diagnosed me as further along. It was a good thing that I followed my gut. I just didn't like the doctor. He didn't listen to me. It wasn't that he medically gaslit me, he just minimized how I was feeling. So the first visit was his looking at my blood results, telling me what he thinks that I had. Then he gave me the different tests I had to have. I could have had thyroid cancer. I had all these different tests. It was quite scary. But I was so busy at work, so busy with my brother's wife being with ovarian cancer. Like, my focus was just get through this. Don't like make a big deal because my sister-in-law was dying. I just had Graves' disease. So I go through and to find out I don't have thyroid cancer. And this is an important thing to cite with menopause, because your hormones, you're in such an active state of change. Graves' disease is an autoinflammatory disease, which means your system's inflamed, it's fighting and battling your system. And so I went and had all the tests. I left the doctor because he treated me like a number. Another important thing to cite, I did not feel comfortable with him. He had incredible credentials. I didn't like him. So I called I called my internist, and he connected me within his practice with an endocrinologist who was amazing. She said, you weren't as far along as that other doctor said you were. He wanted me to do radioactive iodine, which would have put me into hypothyroid. And hypothyroid, you put on 10 to 30 pounds because your system slows down. Anyway, long story short, she put me on some medication for 18 months. I went gluten-free, which I'm a big advocate for going gluten-free. And I've been in remission for 10 years. And then I do everything in my life, because I also believe with autoinflammatory diseases, if you are in a stress-induced situation, that can only exacerbate what your body's feeling, mind, body, spirit, right? So I went through that. So I would say that the biggest thing was having that, getting Graves' disease, and continuing to have not hot flashes, but more night sweats, and probably loss of libido, which is normal, and but other than that, not awful. Some, like I would say during the perimenopause and up until menopause, like sleepless nights, yes, like broken sleep. Now I wake up maybe once a night to probably, go to the bathroom. But that's normal as you age, versus it being because I'm waking up from hot flashes or night sweats.
Yeah. No, thank you for sharing that. And I think it's testament to the fact that our experiences are so varied. Like, some people have the worst possible experience you could think of. Some people, like you, they're in it and don't even realize they're in it. I have spoken to women who've said, I've had nothing. My hair is going gray, or I may have dry mouth or what have you, but it's not excessive symptoms. You had that, huh?
Well, yeah, and I have never attached the dry mouth or anything
Right.
to, and that's the thing. I would say when I started perimenopause, I wasn't even aware of all the things
Right.
other than the motor symptoms. So, and HRT was discussed, but because I had worked at a company that worked during the WLI days, so with those stats, I'm like, I'm not touching
Right.
that. And then I reached a point where I missed that 10-year mark where HRTs could have been beneficial. And I'm like, now I'm not putting it in my body. But now in hindsight, maybe it would have been a good thing. Maybe it would have done other things for me. I will say the one thing that I didn't mention is brain fog. I
Mm.
would say I've had brain fog, like memory loss and stuff. Yeah, so guilty of that. But again, I didn't attach it. I just thought I was so busy because I had a very high pressure job, very busy family life. Like I pushed it off. And I think it's important. I think a message here to women is to say, hey, don't attribute it to something else. Recognize that these symptoms are actually a manifestation of this life transition you're in, your body, your hormones, your estrogen levels, and acknowledge that. Because as soon as you do, even if you do nothing about it, acknowledging it makes you recognize it's not you. You're not crazy. Things are different. And also, like, I wasn't even able to communicate that with my family and have them understand that, you know what? This all makes sense. Mom's going through menopause,
Yeah.
and
Yeah, it was what it was. People, we didn't know. And so there wasn't enough to pass on to the people who are in our homes or in our workplace. There just was not enough information. Now we've got lists available. And so in hindsight, like you said, when you go back and you look at those lists and information, you realize, oh my God, I had dry mouth, or I had itchy skin, or I had dry ears, or, there was something with my equilibrium. My ear felt weird, whatever it is. There are so many things that people are realizing now was associated with it. Okay, so we have just two more questions. You mentioned self-care. What are three self-care rituals that helps you to stay grounded and rooted and centered?
well, I already said that. I wake up, before I get out of bed, I do box breathing, at least three. I do some movement in my feet. This sounds crazy, in my hands, just to sort of awaken them. Um, and then, I have a whole routine. So I think it's like between making bed, getting coffee ready, doing some yoga moves for about 5 minutes and sit ups to get my blood flowing, and then going straight into meditation for 20 minutes. So I have like this timing the way I do it. I'm very particular. But at the end, I journal with my coffee. So after my coffee's made, I don't have my coffee till after meditation. So I meditate for 20 minutes, and then I journal every day, and I try and get into gratitudes. It's not that I don't have moments where I share other things, but I really try and say, well, what is the flip side of looking at, because we can all look at the negatives and things, but hey, you learn more about this person or this situation because now what have you. So I spend a lot of time in gratitude, which I never did before because I was too busy to, but now I give it time. And believe it or not, up until about, I would say, 28 degrees Celsius, I go out to the pier. I live by the water, and I journal outside. I bring my coffee with me, and I'm out in nature. And I highlight that because being in nature is so healing. Just hearing the birds, smelling the fresh air, feeling the wind. It literally has the ability to inspire and transform your state of being in that moment. And so it's really helpful to me.
Ritual, so powerful, so powerful. And to end our conversation, I have one more hypothetical if and then what
Okay.
question. This is not a
Yeah.
hard one. It's,
Okay. All right.
if society fully embraced and celebrated women in midlife, how do you think our culture, workplaces, and media would look different?
Wow. That's a big
Yeah.
question, and it's a loaded question. I mean, if society embraced women in midlife, first of all, we'd have a lot of women supporting other women because they wouldn't feel that they're fighting for that one seat in whatever this table, wherever the table is, whether it's work, community, home, it would be an open table for everybody. So I think that it would breed more open, more love, and I think that the world needs love in a big way. I think in terms, so if I look at society, I would say love. I think women would be more inclined to just support women in every capacity within communities. So when we think society, I think communities. Going into spaces and recognizes and smiling, like simple, like random acts of kindness and moments have so much power to transform another person's life. So I think you'd be seeing a lot more of that, a lot less fixated on self and how I am and how I'm doing, because we would feel more accepted. So I think that, I've done a lot of work on that self-discovery, learning about self and accepting and loving self. But I think that if we're embraced at all ages, and particularly in midlife, there would be a greater sense of self-acceptance. When you accept yourself, you're going to go out and do good, because you're not focused on how you have to show up and be seen. It's not eyes on you. It's you and what you can do for others. And so I think, women will always be givers, but I think because we're in such a competitive matrix society with such a system in place, a patriarchal system, it forces women to be less inclined to sit side by side and support, and be more like, well, what's that opportunity for me? As it relates to media, I think what it would show is it would show more women of all ages in all forms of media, from everything from different TV series, different movies. It would celebrate the aging. There are, please don't get me wrong, there are movies and some series that do, but there would be more of it. It would probably be less. It would be more about accepting yourself as you age and saying, I'm going to be this type of person. What media has done is it forced women to do so much work on themselves. And I'm talking like work in terms of reconstruction, that they're no longer their authentic selves. They're a form of themselves to be able to show up in the world that they've been part of. So I think media, it's been very harmful to women. So I think it'll allow women to age more gracefully. You'll see more midlife and older, when you think of, news channels and what have you, women showing up in different TV shows and different opportunities to be speaking up. It won't just celebrate the youth and the young. And I think it's interesting because when you think about the aging population in midlife, they're probably spending more time on TV because they're alone, they're home, what have you. So you'd think that you want to show them themselves. The workplace. So I think the workplace would be looking for less opportunity to get rid of people who've been at organizations for 25 and 30 years, because they'd say, unless they're stuck, unless they aren't producing, they would value people wherever they are in the life journey, and that they'd want to hire people with the multi, decades of experience, because they bring a wisdom and expertise, because they've seen things happen, and we know history repeats itself. So if you look at that in the workplace, the ability to bring that wisdom into that environment. Now listen, not all people should be in that environment, because they might not be as productive, but I'm saying being open to it, where companies support people at all stages at being productive, and showing that it matters to have a diverse workforce, an intergenerational and diverse workforce in every sense of the word, not just in representation of, color and background, but of age, because I think, as we age, we accumulate so much knowledge. And what happens is that knowledge just goes away, it becomes invisible, and it's missed opportunity. And I think it's interesting because, like, when you think about the products that are being created for the aging population, is it created by the people who actually need them? Are they spending a lot of time in those communities understanding, like, what are those unmet needs? How can you make it better for me? Or is it a lot of presumption? Oh yeah, I've been a caregiver for the, I know what they want. You really need to sit in those spaces and know them. So I think that if we work on changing that, I think if we work on valuing women in midlife and, in all those spaces, we will be in a much happier place as a world, as a society, as a workplace, as a community, and in the home fronts. Like, it's on every level, because it's systemic. The impact of devaluing a human life and it being a woman, it has a ripple effect that we can't even put a number to. So if you do the opposite, suddenly you're valuing a community and showing them that they matter, that we're going to create spaces for you, we're going to create opportunities for you, we're going to create opportunities for you in the workplace, we're going to create opportunities for you in the communities, we're going to create opportunities for you in the world in a different way, because you matter. Because without you women at this stage, the world ceases to exist in a way that that cycles into the next generation. You need that aging population. You need the women to have gone through that because it cycles and circles around. And so I think that would be my answer.
I love that. I appreciate that. Yeah, and then maybe I'll see more correspondents who are 80 years old out there sharing their perspective. I'd like that world. We can dream and hope and keep the hope and dream alive. Elizabeth, thank you so much. But before you go, tell us where we can find you, how we can stay connected with you on your various different platforms.
Okay, so underthesisterhood.com is our website. We have monthly events, Under the Hood events. We're having one on April 16th, Under the Hood of Social Connectedness. You can go onto the website, underthesisterhood.com, and sign up. They're free events. Anyone who wants to do any sort of branding, mission-driven work, social impact work, and initiatives, as well as get into insights, an insights engine, please reach out to Otherhood Agency, otherhoodagency.com. You could also reach out to me, Elizabeth at Otherhood Agency. I do want to go back one more time to Under the Sisterhood. We're doing amazing programs and amazing work in corporations. We've signed Johnson & Johnson, and we're in there. We launched an initiative, big initiative for Women's History Month. So please, we would love to find and create spaces for women in meaningful ways and get under the hood of everything. Women's health's a big thing. So just reach out to Elizabeth at underthesisterhood.com. And one last thing, we have a not-for-profit, so any proceeds we make from Under the Sisterhood, from a corporation, we put a percentage of our profits into Sisterhood, where we go in and we serve underdeveloped communities, and we help build sister leaders and sisterhoods in ways through wellness programming. So the money you spend, we actually put, so J&J, we're doing X project with them, a percentage of that goes back to Sisterhood. And the same thing with Otherhood Agency, what we're going to be doing there is with that work, a percentage of the revenue or profits will go into sponsoring something with Under the Sisterhood so that they're doing and giving back.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that information. All of this is going to be included in the show notes so people will know where to click and find you and stay connected with you. Listeners, thank you so much for tuning in. Let's continue to perimenopause and prosper.